Our next speaker is Caleb Park. The title of Caleb's speech is My Dark, Beautiful, Twisted Isolation.
Hurrying inside the apartment building, my mother clutched my hand as we walked past strangers and finally arrived at the elevator, taking off the mask that we had been wearing. We were in the middle of Seoul, Korea during a coronavirus outbreak. However, this outbreak is not the COVID-19 that we know and love today. This was MERS, a coronavirus that spread to South Korea during the spring of 2015. In fourth grade, this new world seemed completely alien to me. I entered the apartment only to be greeted by two more of these strange-speaking Koreans, only this time, I was told that they were my great aunt and uncle. In the week that we spent in that apartment, I spent most of my time isolating myself from the massive relatives that came over to greet us. My life up until then had been filled with stories of the homeland, how my grandparents had left Korea after the war and became respectable doctors in the US. Now that my family is back in Korea, I felt more isolated than ever. The isolation I felt allowed me to recognize myself as an American for the first time. I was a foreigner there, an alien from another land, even if I looked like them. The question of nationality might be obvious to some, but as a third-generation Korean American, it wasn't always clear-cut. Unlike many Korean Americans, I didn't grow up speaking Korean. Looking back, my introversion and the language barrier probably didn't leave a very good impression on my extended family. However, the week that I spent in that Korean apartment was my first significant encounter with isolation. I'm sure everyone is sick of isolation. When I first heard about mandatory quarantine, I thought, wow, this will be a fun break from school. Turns out the break became a nearly year-long international crisis. We've all taken a toll from COVID, and I'm sure that everyone is ready to take that vaccine and finally strip off the mask that we've been wearing for far too long. However, I think it's important to take a step back and appreciate the time that self-isolation has given us. In between the Zoom calls and virtual activities, we've had more time home alone than ever before. This alone time has given us the opportunity to finally pursue those things that we just never had the time to fit into our schedules. In fact, isolation is an important tool utilized by people throughout history to focus and regroup. Take Beethoven, for example. As his deafness became worse, Beethoven started to isolate and developed an even deeper connection to his music. In his deaf isolation, Beethoven was able to complete some of his most famous works, including the entirety of his Ninth Symphony. Although his isolation was an unfortunate result of his deafness, it allowed him to truly hone his skills and create masterpieces. For a more modern musician, take Kanye. After some drama with Taylor Swift, Ye needed some time to himself, time to think. Fleeing from the paparazzi and media, he holed himself up in Hawaii to work on his next big project with a few other musicians. By self-isolating, Kanye allowed himself to regroup from the outside world and create the album that is now known as My Dark, Beautiful, Twisted Fantasy. Although I personally prefer Late Registration, My Dark, Beautiful, Twisted Fantasy is widely regarded as Kanye's masterpiece. Self-isolation blocked any outside distractions and allowed Kanye to focus on his craft and perfect his art. Although he occasionally met with other artists, Kanye was in the zone, finally free from the usual disturbances of the world. During the most notorious pandemic, the Black Plague, people were also using isolation to their advantage. Even Macbeth, the famous tragedy, was written during Shakespeare's time in quarantine. Although Kanye, Beethoven, and other artists were able to use isolation to their advantage, not everyone is a creative genius. Sometimes quarantining can be too much, and we need others in order to maintain our sanities through tough times. Pandemics are in no way a good thing, and COVID-19 has taken far too much from all of us. However, in moderation, isolation can be used to do great things. That perfect run on an instrument or that amazing half-court shot when all the cameras were off were all done in isolation. We're in the zone because of it. When we isolate ourselves and block out distractions, we can reach our true potential and improve upon ourselves. With the internet, it's hard to avoid disturbances. Even within the confines of our room, we can distract ourselves with programs, games, text, email, shopping, news, videos, music, and terabytes upon terabytes of other content. In this interconnected world, isolation is a necessary tool to center ourselves and work on what's important. From the 5-minute meditation to a personal realization of nationality like I had, self-isolation can be a tool for enhanced focus. Use it wisely, and you can create your own My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, your own 9th Symphony, your own masterpiece. Thank you.